Buenos dias, buenos dias. Good morning to you all. This is the one percenters on day 3, so I appreciate you all being here. My name is James Aldrete. I'm an Austin-based consultant and a member of the AAPC Board of Directors. I'm also the Democratic co-chair for this conference, which basically means we get to take the credit for all the work of the staff. But I just want to make sure that it's been a beautiful conference so far, and if you do get a chance, please credit, thank, and acknowledge the amazing AAPC staff. We do have enough, yes. Couple quick announcements. We do have another full day of breakouts along with the adventures this afternoon. And I just want to make sure that if you are doing the horseback riding in the rainforest, they're just encouraging you to please dress appropriately and be prepared to board the bus at 1:15. It's taking off, for a little bit of trip. That sounds like a great time. And all other tours will be leaving at 1:30. I have a number of colleagues that have enjoyed this association, but I just want to, before we get started, welcome the president of the International Association of Political Consultants to say a few words, Matthew Klink.
All right, I promise to be brief. You never want to be the last speaker before cocktails or the first speaker after a late night. So, for the first time in 3 years, the International Association of Political Consultants has its convention in London, England, from November 14th through 16th. If you have never been to an IAPC convention, they are awesome. They're a lot smaller than the AAPC, but we'll have 3 days of political experts from around the world. This year, day 1 will be all about the UK. Day 2 will be a deep dive into the European Union and the elections, particularly France and Germany. And then day 3, we'll jump back out and talk about the world, Africa, some in South America, obviously the American midterms. So let me play my little video tease and then I'll get off, but we hope to see you in London in mid-November. Hit it. That's it. We'd love to see you there. We're going to have some great parties. I think we're going to do a dinner in the Tower of London. So those of you that you want to have dinner with the crown jewels of London, happy to make that happen. We'll be in the Churchill War Rooms for a cocktail reception. So it'll be a blast. We hope to see you.
These whole events are also really possible by our sponsors, and I appreciate that every one of them kind of brings also a learning opportunity. So right now I'd like to acknowledge this morning's sponsor, The Trade Desk, a media buying platform built for the open internet, and just a short video, and then we'll have a few more remarks.
How do you persuade undecided voters in an unprecedented election year? By developing a connected TV strategy unlike any other. I'm Damian Fowler, Senior Editor at The Trade Desk. Today, we're exploring how the political ad agency GMMB helped a presidential campaign win over voters in 15 key swing states using connected TV. And they did it with only positive, values-based messaging. To learn more, I chatted with Erica Monteith from GMMB and Mike Hudkins from The Trade Desk. Erica, can you tell us about this campaign?
Of course, we knew there were roughly 15 states that were going to decide the entire thing. We also knew that the pandemic had caused a huge surge in streaming TV. So we thought, how can we reach undecided voters in those 15 states who aren't watching linear TV?
The answer? The Trade Desk's Extending Linear Reach Planning Tool. It helped GMMB connect with more than 3 million households they would have missed on linear alone. But Mike, the campaign wasn't just limited to cord cutters, was it?
No. By tapping into the Incremental Reach report, we learned that our ads were reaching 20 million connected TV households. That's 90% of all connected TV households in those states.
And it also gave you more control over ad frequency, so voters weren't bombarded by the same ads over and over.
That's correct. On linear, we knew we had high frequencies with certain households. Many campaigns reach a point where you actually have diminishing returns. And we wanted to make sure our frequency was right for those low TV and no TV users, so we turned to connected TV, where we were able to cap our frequencies at 7 ads per household to protect against that oversaturation.
That also helped lower cost per unique reach by 80% from $1.17 to just 23 cents.
I mean, these are really impressive results. But there's one big benefit we haven't covered yet.
For political campaigns, speaking to voters about the issues they care about most is really what matters. With connected TV, we can tailor our messaging and speak to audiences on a very direct human level. That doesn't just make our advertising more effective, but I truly believe it has the power to elevate the political discourse as well.
Better advertising, better politics. That's a win-win. Learn more about connected TV at thetradedesk.com.
If you please join me in welcoming Senior Account Executive for the Trade Desk, Mike Hudkins.
Thanks, James. I'm super excited to be here today to kick off the final day of the Pollies. Again, I'm Mike Hudkins, as James said, from the Trade Desk. We're an independent media buying platform designed for the open internet. For those of you who have not worked with us, we help advertisers connect with voters at the right place, at the right time, and on the issues that matter most to them. With access to the most advanced data marketplace in the world, premium inventory across channels, including connected television, and nationwide reach and frequency. Lost where I was. We can hit voters more effectively and efficiently than ever before. We believe connected TV will be incredibly important to this election cycle, and we know that audiences have migrated over to streaming platforms in record numbers during the pandemic. So connected TV has emerged as a powerhouse alternative for candidates and political parties looking to reach and target prospective voters. This means that OTT and CTV inventory will be a hot commodity moving forward, and through our network of premium partnerships like NBCU, Fox, Discovery, Disney, and many others, Trade Desk is your one-stop shop for effective, data-driven TV advertising on the most premium inventory available in the marketplace. So it's not just about remnant advertising anymore. The voters you want to engage are streaming television. And finally, our commitment to political advertising is longstanding. I'm really proud of what we've proven in the last couple of election cycles, which is that we've objectively represent both sides of the aisle, we support a fair process, and that buying in programmatic gives room for both parties to run a better process than what they have in the past. So again, really excited about our track record and for the opportunity to do more on both sides of the aisle this year. Because at Trade Desk, we do believe that every voter matters, so we look forward to enabling a more effective campaign cycle for all of us here, this year, and for many years to come. So now I'm pleased to introduce our next speakers, Mandy Grunwald and Rosa Mendoza. Over to you both.
Take this one if that's okay. Okay. I don't know if the mics are on. Great.
I hope so. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you guys are all doing great. So our conversation today is with Mandy, whom I just had the pleasure of meeting, but every single person at my firm and every single person that I talk to says wonderful things about you.
And all I hear is what a great young pollster you are. So it's
thank
a
you.
pleasure to meet you too. And as I said, lots of new young female consultants in the business, which I think is fabulous.
Yes, I actually do want to talk a little bit about that. But before we get into it, I'd love to hear more about why politics. You could have done so many things. You're so creative. Why choose politics out of it all?
I kind of stumbled into the business in college, actually. My father was a journalist. He was actually the managing editor of Time magazine. So I was kind of used to a household in the middle of the news and the action. But I always had a creative bent. And I was always trying to find different ways to combine sort of strategy and creative. never could quite figure it out. And I was in my junior year at college at Harvard, and I woke up hungover one morning, as one does, and thought, oh my God, I'm almost out of here, and I haven't taken advantage of the resources of this great university. And I picked up my Harvard Crimson, and there was an ad for the Institute of Politics and some study groups, and one was on politics and advertising. And I thought, well, that sounds kind of interesting. And a nice young firm based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, was running this. I have to say, like, in retrospect, sort of all of the towering figures of the business at that time came and spoke to us, and they were lost on me. I really did not get any of it yet. But I was interested enough that I went to see the guys, one of the guys who ran this business, and said, this is really interesting. I want to do this for the summer. Where I live in New York, so I could work for free. Can you tell me the names of some companies? I'm not asking you for a job, but like, and he said, you have no experience. You don't know anything. We're a nothing little firm, and you know, we've got a stack of resumes this high. This is really, in retrospect, kind of the dawn of the business. But I was persistent, and basically, who wouldn't want me for free, right? Like, who doesn't want a free intern? And he told me there were 3 firms in New York. I won't use their names because they're all dead now, but he said one was crazy, one was a son of a bitch, and if I was lucky, David Sawyer would hire me, which he did. And I was with him when he loved me, and I went back after graduation. I was there for 10, 12 years, became his partner, and so on. So that's how I got into the business, kind of like one hungover morning, and there you go.
That's great to hear. Well, as you started within the business, I do want to talk about a little bit more about why you decided to stay. Because I think once we gain access to a lot of different consultants in the industry, you start to see, oh, there's different facets to all of this. So what made you want to double down into advertising?
You know, it's an interesting question. I was drawn to the film side of the business before I was drawn to the strategy. And starting out in New York, the quality, David Sawyer had come from the documentary film world, where a lot of sort of first generation media consultants started. And his later partner, Scott Miller, had been the creative director at one of New York's biggest ad agencies. He'd been Coca-Cola's creative director, so he wrote some of the greatest ads like in the history. And they were really my mentors on the creative side. And I thought a lot at different times, not of going into the advertising business, but of the film business, of the documentary side. And then I realized that, like, whatever that childhood I had in the middle of the action, that no, I loved campaigns, and I loved the action, I loved the strategic choices. And there was one funny day, Scott Miller still did some work for Coca-Cola, and we were doing a video for one of their conventions. And in the old days when you had to go to an edit room, and I was alone in this edit room, and I was doing a sort of mashup of a lot of their different campaigns to make a different point. And this place had 5 other edit rooms, and Sprite was in one room, and Coca-Cola was in one room, and each of those rooms had about 15 people, because in the ad business, there's the account executive and the junior account executive who's dealing with the, brand manager and the junior brand manager, and then there's the director and the producer, and I was just doing it myself. And I thought, what other place can you do 20 different jobs but being a media consultant? And it's still the thing I love about the job. There are days when you are sitting at a typewriter or at a computer and writing a script, and there are days when you are being a strategist, and there are days when you're worrying about media buying and connected TV, and I loved the fact that you didn't have to choose.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I love about politics as well.
Yeah.
And you're also in the same room where you might not be doing media, but you're learning so much from your counterparts at the same time that you become more strategic with one another as well. That's
And
right.
There's something so absolute about winning and losing. If you increase your brand share 1% in the, have you won? Have you not won? Like, we know with absolute certainty we either did it or we didn't, which can be devastating on certain days and really thrilling. And I kind of liked that.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about that because you have been instrumental at getting a lot of people elected, including a handful of senators, and I say a handful of senators to minimize that, but you have certainly done a lot on the Democratic side. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of these races and what are some of the strategies that I think you think would be applicable to people in the room to know about how successful some of these were?
I don't know how to generalize,
Yeah.
and maybe that's the point, that you really have to understand the moment, the state, and who your candidate is. There are people in our business who bring their own political beliefs and preconceptions to a campaign. I try not to. I try to really listen to who I'm working for and devise a campaign that feels right to them, and that's very true in the advertising. I want the advertising to be their voice, not my voice or some generic voice. And I mean, I have worked for a lot of people running for Senate who become senators. You can see that they range ideologically from, I don't know, from Elizabeth Warren to John Hickenlooper. And to me, I don't pay attention as much. I don't have any kind of, litmus test on ideology, or I just want to fashion a campaign that feels right for them. And then you really have to also understand, and you know this as a pollster, understand the moment in that state. Even in a state like, we all wind up working in certain states over and over again, and New Hampshire, Minnesota, Colorado, there are a couple of states I've worked in a lot, but each cycle in those states is different too. I think, I grew up in New York City, the mean streets of Park Avenue, and I knew there was nothing about my childhood or about the life I've led that was going to help me in politics except the ability to listen. And a lot of people in our business think, well, I grew up in Ohio and I know who our voters are. I know how to listen, and I think that's a very valuable thing. That's the only sort of generalized strategy. Listen to your candidate. Don't make them do something that's not right for them. Understand, obviously, the opposition, which can be the fun part. And also really listen to the voters in the moment and try to make all of that mesh.
Yeah. I appreciate the fact that you said, look, there's no way to generalize this, because I would agree with you. Every single campaign is completely different. Every single candidate is completely different. What are some of the ways in which you think through a candidate or a race or the demographics, whether it's a midterm or a general election, towards taking all of these different data points or different obstacles in some ways before actually creating an ad? What are some of the things that you actually do preemptively prior to putting pen to paper on the 30-second?
You always want to work backwards from election day. I mean, I always think that's the simplest way to think about what we do. Who's going to decide what they think they're voting for when they walk into the voting booth or fill out a ballot, or however we're voting these days? And, is it change versus more of the same? Is it, safe versus risky? Like, if you can frame the choice you want people making or thinking the election's about and work back from that, you usually start in a pretty good place. You always have to know your greatest weakness and how to be ready for it, and don't just think, oh, I hope they don't bring that up, because that's not happening. I mean, occasionally it happens, but you have to be ready, so ready that you almost want it to happen.
Yeah.
And I've been through that, where I've gotten so prepared for something, done ads a year in advance, knowing that we're going to get hit on something, and then it plays out just as you kind of imagined it, which is incredible. So I guess that's the answer.
Yeah.
Be ready.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to ask a twofold question. The first one is your favorite ad.
Huh?
And then the second one is the most successful ad.
We're talking about thousands of
Yeah.
ads, folks. One of my favorite ads, I worked for Al Franken, as you saw in the film last night, and Al had written something satirical about let's just say, insulting in some way or another about pretty much every group in society. He was a comedy writer. And so we had the attack ads were on the air against him were among the most brutal I've ever seen. You know, is he fit to be a United States senator? He's written about committing rape. You know, like, what do you do, people? Like, what do you do? And each one, we'd go to Al and he'd say, you have to understand it was like this. And it was like, no, we're not going to explain why it was really funny at the time.
Yeah.
And what did you do? And I thought, in the end, this is about character, and what is my best way of telling people what his character is? And I'd known Al for a really long time, even before the campaign. And he's been married to his high school sweetheart, and is to this day. They met in, college sweetheart, they met at a mixer freshman week. And I thought, and she had struggled with alcoholism, and she'd never talked about it. And I asked her if she would do an ad, because I knew that the thing that made me understand who he was best was their marriage. And standing by her through really hard times with alcoholism told you more about him than any stupid joke or funny joke he'd ever written. And so I did an ad with Franny that was a 60 talking about her alcoholism, how hard it had been, and well, he won by 312 votes. He likes to say Franny saved the day. So I think in terms of like impact, and it was just so emotional. She'd never spoken about it, and she became a kind of rock star across Minnesota. She went to, Al always tells a story, there was a debate like a week after that went on the air, and as she walked in to sit in the audience, she got a standing ovation.
Oh, wow.
So it was moving from many points of view, but it was also effective. And we all deal with that question, and we will deal with it more and more, like how do you deal with a character assault? And sometimes, well, often you can't answer the question. You have to answer the essence, and the essence was like, what kind of person is this? And that was how we answered the question. So.
Great. I want to go back to the Clinton race, mainly because I think it's one of the pieces that I was most interested in, because you were one of the only women that, one, was part of the campaign, but two, was really leading a very large portion of it overall. And I kind of want to preemptively ask, prior to answering that, what are some of the steps that you took professionally in order to make sure that you were part of the room and were also, you know, instrumental in the room that you were in?
You know, there's preparation and there's luck, and there was a lot of both. I had just moved to Washington. We just saw a video about GMMB. It was then GMMG. I was partners with Frank Greer and Jim Margolis and David Mitchell. They had just put my name on the door, the first kind of woman who'd had her name on the door of a big firm. And Frank Greer had a client named Bill Clinton. And I didn't really expect to be part of the campaign in any way. They were trying to decide whether to hire a guy named James Carville, who had then done like 3 campaigns. And he and I had done one together in Kentucky for a man named Wallace Wilkinson in, the usual off-year Kentucky election. So I'd spent a lot of time down there. We were a very odd couple, like Louisiana, New York, but we hit it off. We won this improbable governor's race, had a great time, and I knew he was brilliant. Like, I just knew, and we had, it was a really interesting thing. So when he came to the Clinton campaign, and they were thinking of hiring him, and everyone was like, who the hell is this guy? I was like, oh, no, Frank, like, guys, this is Stan Greenberg, all the people involved. This guy's really good, and obviously it was a very catalytic moment for the campaign. And little by little, they just kind of drew me into it. Although I have to say that, here's the luck part, in the moment when the tabloid stories about Jennifer Flowers exploded on the scene, which was a different kind of moment than the Me Too movement now, but it was, it all came from the National Enquirer, not the New York Times, and it was, anyway. I was asked, not because I was part of the campaign, but I was asked to go on Nightline, which was then sort of the biggest show on news show, to talk about this. And I didn't have anything to do with the campaign. They only wanted me because they were like, oh, we got to find a woman. Does anyone know a woman consultant? Like, oh, I heard there's this woman. You know. So they didn't even know I was in any way connected to the campaign. Anyway, I went on, and I had just moved to Washington, and I had no life because I didn't know anyone yet. So I watched Nightline every night. And I knew they hadn't done a story about the New Hampshire primary, which was about to happen, or any story about politics. And so I kind of took Ted Koppel apart and just said, like, you know, here you are. You haven't done a single story about the New Hampshire primary. This is an incredibly important moment for the country. The economy's falling apart, and this is your first show like this, a tabloid news report? And it was sort of a big thing. It kind of, my whole life exploded. Luck, right? I just happened to be a lonely woman in Washington, D.C. watching Nightline every night. And I went, you know, best defense, good offense. Or is it the other way? Anyway, that was sort of how I wound up in that world. And the Clintons were watching, and they were like, we want her. And that's sort of how I got my job.
Wow. This is on YouTube, by the way. So if you have not YouTube this video, it is highly recommended.
There's some big shoulder pads involved. That's all I can say. It was a long time ago.
I do kind of want to go back to where the women, we need a woman in the room, because I unfortunately it continues to happen, right? We have not moved past that. As you think through your life and your career and everything that you've been able to accomplish, what are some of the recommendations that you would give to young women in the audience or within AAPC overall that are wanting to potentially follow in your footsteps?
It has changed a lot. I mean, it really has. At the very beginning, any meeting I went to, the only woman was the spouse. I mean, and occasionally a fundraiser. And once in a blue moon, the firm I worked for Chris Dodd, my first year, 1980, doing this, and Rosa DeLauro was his campaign manager. And it meant something to me, like, oh, a woman can actually, like, have big influence. Don't let anyone tell you no. Like, if you want it, go get it. Work with people you respect. Even if it isn't exactly what you want to do, who you work with matters more. I always try to tell people, when people come to me for advice, I try to send people to firms or people I have respect for, because we all work crazy hours and round the clock. You may as well like the people and respect the people you work for. And don't be scared to make a change. You know, I was with David Sawyer for 12 years, and I decided that firm was becoming more corporate, and I made a leap to Washington. It was a little bit of a leap of faith. When I started out going to a pitch, I would bring one of the male associates in my firm along because they didn't quite believe I was the lead. And then, you know, there were times when they would sort of address him first.
Yep.
And then little by little it was like, oh, she's in charge. Interesting, you know, and it takes a while, but you have to trust your own voice and own instincts. And, you know, this is a business of personalities in many ways. It's a business where competence is measured very absolutely. Like, we can bullshit a little bit, but honestly, you win or you lose. And if you're good, that's everything.
Yeah.
So.
Great, thank you for that. I do want to talk about your son. Because your son, I mean, from what we heard and we saw last night, is a very, very big part of your life. But also being a woman within the business, it is hard to balance it all. So can you talk to us a little bit more about having a son and having it all?
Well, I said last night I've been lucky enough to have a successful career and a successful son, not so much a successful marriage. So I can't have everything maybe. You know, my generation and those just ahead of me, there are a lot of women who didn't have families, who didn't get married, who didn't have children. And I was very scared that having a child would somehow interrupt my ability. But this was as affirmative as I got. I thought, I'll feel really stupid if I don't do it. And I was like 39. So, you know, it was like, And of course, it was the best decision I ever made. And you find a way to make it work. And now, there are people here who have probably heard this. I mean, I take people aside all the time and say, don't wait, have a child, you'll figure it out. Don't miss this. And I'm totally surprised by that because I was not affirmative. I was not one of those people who grew up and thought I must have children. But it's great. And I'm really lucky to have a great son, and he's a documentary filmmaker in New York, and, you know, where would he get such interests? I don't know. But I really, I know it's not just true for women, it's true for men too. How do you live this life and figure out how to juggle? You find a way because it's worth it. I mean, I probably took fewer West Coast campaigns because I wanted to be able to travel, get back from travel. So you make little decisions like that, and you know, you find a way. If you want to, you find a way. So don't mess it up.
No, thank you. I also, I have heard that you do make this recommendation to a lot of women in the industry, which I appreciate, because you actually don't hear that a lot.
I know.
It's not part of the conversation.
I mean, look, I know we all want to get to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. I was ridiculously young when I helped elect a president. And so, you know, oh my God, that's the thing we all want, right? And I did it by the time I was 34. So then what? Well, you know, then I started thinking what else matters. And, you know, other people, there were people who wanted me to become a commentator, and I just thought, no, I want to keep electing people and winning campaigns, so I knew that. But I also think it matters to have a life.
Yep.
And, you know, we all define that life and we all define family in different ways, but I really encourage people all the time. People know film crews, campaign managers, they've all heard this from me. Don't mess it up. It really is a meaningful part of life.
Great. Thank you for that. Yeah. I know we're somewhat wrapping it up, so I do want to ask you about mentorship or any mentors or people that you looked up to while you were going through the business, climbing through, while also at the same time maybe you currently still do.
Many along the way, and you know, you try to learn from people as best you can. David Sawyer, who, as I said, was my first boss, he was kind of a very waspy, very dry person, but he was a great filmmaker, and he had an insatiable interest in finding smart people to be around, and I really watched that and noticed that. I also, just to give you a sense, we used to have weekend meetings, and as I said, it would be like 8 guys and me in the room, and I will never forget the day that somebody said, hey, we're out of coffee. Can you fill the pitcher? And they all looked at me and David said, I got it. And you know, it's a dumb little thing that has always stayed with me. And I knew he wanted them to treat me with respect so he could offload some work to me. But it was it was just a big moment. You know, it was just like, you're not going to do that. She's not just going to be the coffee girl. And so there are things like that. Scott Miller, who I talked about, really taught me how to write and how to write an ad. And he's still around. He has an amazing sense of seeing the heroic in each candidate. And that really taught me something, that people want to have a sort of a bigger sense of a candidate, and he's such a good writer, and so he really taught me that part of the business. And I could keep going. And I feel like, you know, we're all on Zooms with each other, I feel like I learn from my colleagues all the time. I learned from James Carville, a ton. I learn from pollsters and colleagues all the time. So. And frankly, from some of my clients.
Yeah. How would you recommend people to stay in touch with people that they do look up to, or how do you recommend opening that door or that conversation?
Just do it. Like, you know, there's like, nobody dislikes getting a note. Nobody dislikes getting an email. Like, just if you want to stay in touch, stay in touch.
Well, thank you. Thank you for this. I
It's
really appreciate it.
pleasure.
And congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thanks.
Great job.
Good?
Yeah. I think so.
If you can join me in just thanking Mandy Grunwald and Rosa Mendoza one more time. This is why you tough out the hangover and make it on day 3 to the breakfast session. So thank you all for being here. All right, up next is going to be slides just showing locations for the breakout sessions. We got plenty of still great programming, and for those on the afternoon adventures, I hope you enjoy it. And we'll see you this evening again for the Polly Awards. Thank you.